Welcome, everyone. It's really good to see you guys here. Got to see, I think, probably your kids were at this service, correct? Yeah? So we got to hang out with them back here for like 30 minutes before you guys came in, which was really good. It was hard to read their faces if they're like excited or nervous or don't know what to think or whatever. But nevertheless, connecting with you guys and talking about this transition, I don't know if I can describe how significant it is. Obviously, no one cares more about your kid than you, besides probably God. But outside of God, no one cares more. And I often think that as Impact staff and as Impact volunteers, we care, and we care deeply. And we see students transition so much, and we see a lot of transitions go awesome and go great. And we see the benefits of that, of them walking in community throughout high school. I'm even thinking of my group of sophomore guys that connected, and they stayed the whole freshman year. And for some of them, like, they started getting traction like really quick in their spiritual lives. And there are others that this year, like even in the last few weeks, I have one guy in my small group that he's just started taking off after he went to Blast back in January. And like he's just been like just busting at the seams in his spiritual life. There's like something that takes place. You probably remember when it happened for you, where your spiritual eyes open and like you started to internalize your faith in a deeper way. And I just think about this guy in my small group that's in my mind. I'm like, he really kept coming for a year and a half. And it was, of course, he was building friendships and stuff. And then all of a sudden, the mystery of God, like he just started to get it and grasp it. And now like he has this like spiritual appetite and hunger. And I always think of those students. I'm like, well, what if they were one of the ones that didn't connect, And so we take it so seriously, how significant this transition is. It's not an easy transition. They're going from 3 different service times. You guys are used to them coming on Saturday night to Sunday at 11:15 is our United Worship Gathering. We can talk about how that ended up getting to the place it's in and the story behind it and the rationale and all that kind of stuff. High school is the amount of growth that takes place in high school is obviously tremendous. I mean, for yourselves, just picture your probably 14-year-old if you were sending them off to college tomorrow. Just kind of imagine like if that was real, if you were actually sending them off to college tomorrow. Like, first of all, you think, would they even be like intellectually prepared yet? Would they fail all their classes? Probably. Like, there's going to have to be a lot of intellectual growth in just a 4-year period of time for them to be ready for college. And you even think about like socially, are they like socially ready to like go off and know how to like make their own friends and build community around them? And it's like, probably not as a 14-year-old, but just 4 years from now, you know how quick Elevate flashed by, and Impact in the high school years they'll be gone like that as well. There's a lot of growth that's take place in 4 years. Equally true, spiritually speaking. Imagine if your student was going off to college tomorrow. Imagine if it was tomorrow that they were going to be invited by some very winsome and some very handsome guys or girls on Thursday night to go and do things you definitely don't want your son or daughter going to do, or they're sitting in philosophy class or science class, and subtly or blatantly their faith is being challenged in ways that appear to be airtight and sealed with knowledge. Just imagine if tomorrow that was happening. I think parents get this intuitively, and so you stress the importance of learning and education and growing and these types of things, and that's what you do. You try to prepare your students where they're going to be able to make it when you kind of kick them out of the nest, so to speak. We look at their spiritual lives the same way. The amount of growth that has to take place in a 4-year period of time is outstanding. Of course, they're growing so much physically. Some of your sons will have hair on their chest in 4 years. That's just weird to think. I know it's kind of gross too, but it's like in 4 years' time, they're going to grow so much intellectually, physically. They're going to be changing a lot. This is a critical season. A lot of sociologists, a lot of psychologists argue that this 4 years can be some of the most formative 4-year period of time. in a person's life, a lot of decisions end up getting made that both immediately and long-term end up having all kinds of ramifications. Some of the way that we look at this, our goal in Impact is to prepare students to thrive in their faith once they graduate from high school. We don't want them to survive their faith. We want them to leave Impact like missionaries going into their college campuses. We want their faith to be that strong. And the kind of growth that has to take place in 4 years in order for that to happen is clearly very large. You guys have probably heard statistics. 50% of students that are connected their junior high school years to church and to their faith, once they leave, completely disconnect from the church and abandon their faith. 50%, obviously that's very high. You might even heard numbers that are higher than that. But nevertheless, some of the ways that we look at the kind of growth that has to take place in 4 years as they're developing is when your student comes to us, we kind of expect them. They're 14 years old. We expect, in a way almost, I know this almost sounds negative, but we kind of expect them to still be a little bit spoon-fed in their faith. Metaphorically speaking, we don't expect that they're going out and hunting and, gathering their own food and completely a self-fed believer. We expect that they're going to come to us, we're going to provide for them, we're going to give it to them. But we know that if they're going to be ready to thrive in their faith, by the time that they graduate Impact, they really got to be to a place where they are self-led in their faith, where they can stand on their own 2 feet. Another way that we look at this, what we really hope that your student comes to Impact committed to receiving what the church has to offer them. This sounds negative. Again, it's not intended to be so because they're young. In a sense, we really hope that they come to us as a consumer of their faith. They're at least open to receiving what we've got to give them. But we know that in 4 years, if they're going to thrive in their faith, once they graduate, they've got to move from being a consumer of their faith to being an owner of their faith. The way that we say this is from asking, hey, what can the church do for me, to being at the place what can we and I as the church do for the world? There's a lot of growth that needs to take place spiritually. I think we could all agree in a 4-year period of time. Sometimes what can happen is in the midst of knowing the amount of intellectual growth and social growth that needs to take place, the priorities in a student's life, coming from home, coming from other influences, can be really high in those areas in college preparation, but the spiritual preparation isn't matching that. And we're trying to come at this from the angle of encouraging you guys as the most influential person in your kid's life. You guys have probably seen all the research that shows where the youth pastor's at on the totem pole of how influential we are in your student's life. It's mom and dad and grandparent and everyone else in the world, and finally we're down here. We're just so aware. Families, plan A. We know that you guys have got to be the ones that are setting the temperature and setting the priority. And I know that also part of this development is you're developing your student, you're trying to prepare them. High school years are kind of the years where you start taking your hands off the wheel a little bit. You start trusting them more. You start allowing them to make more of their own decisions. That's natural. That should be taking place. I would also challenge you to not think of transitioning into freshman year as the best time to do that. The transition into freshman year is such a critical transition. I would say don't think of immediately because they're going to high school, that's the time to completely take my hands off the wheel. I would wait. At whatever point you think in your parenting style, whether that's a little bit into their freshman year or into their sophomore year or whatever, and it's obviously going to be gradually, increasingly that you're kind of empowering them. I have talked to several parents this year who have juniors who, when they were freshmen, they said, you're in high school now, you choose. You want to go to church? You want to go to house groups? If you don't, and they're I wish I wouldn't have done that. And I've heard that several times, and now they're we've already done it now. We feel like we can't go back. And they're I wish that at least for a while we would have made them. And if I was in your shoes after seeing so many students transition, I wouldn't say that, but that would be my commitment. They're going to be there. at least for this extended period of time, and you're going to have to choose how long you think that is. Obviously, if you go and you say, hey, no matter what, you're going, well, then they're not going to want to go, and they're not going to like us. So I wouldn't go at that immediately that way. But I would say, challenge you to not necessarily take your hand off the wheel immediately. Okay.